You are listening to Hit Play, Not Pause, a feisty menopause podcast for active, performance-minded women. I am your host, Celine Yeager. Each week, I bring you advice from athletes, scientists, researchers, and other experts to help you feel and perform your best, no matter what your hormones are doing. This show is a production of Live Feisty Media. Hello, strong, feisty women. So before we get to it this week, I have some stuff on my mind. We had our very first Feisty Menopause Performance Retreat at Lake Nona last weekend, and I just want to say that I have come back with my heart about 10 times bigger. It was amazing, like really amazing, and honestly, not in the ways that I expected it to be amazing. I mean, yes, we accomplished all of the stuff that I had hoped. We got these detailed Dari motion analysis movement scans that showed where we were strong and where we had vulnerabilities in our musculoskeletal system. We had heavy lifting and nutrition clinics and the most outstanding presentation by Dr. Vonda Wright at the Houston Clinic. And if anyone wants a doctor who is going to take them to the next level, it's Dr. Vonda freaking Wright. But really what made it one of the most special weekends of my life as far as events are concerned is that we had this incredible community. Women came from all over the country, Alaska, South Carolina, New York City, Wyoming, you name it. And everyone was so open-minded and open-hearted and just wanting to bond and share and lift other women up as they elevated themselves. And we went dancing and we sang and we jumped around like loons and we smashed a lot of preconceived notions about what menopausal women look like and what they do and their outlook on life. And here's where I really have some stuff on my mind. I heard far too much this weekend how women felt lonely, alone, and or dismissed. We honestly had one of the most amazing trainers in attendance, so skilled, so accomplished, so accessible, so smart, the kind of trainer, honestly, you dream of finding. And she has faced like infuriating age discrimination in the workplace, being told that she's no spring chicken and there's an expiration date to consider here. And there was another woman who had gone into menopause relatively early, and she talked about how she felt alone because her same age peers couldn't really relate or weren't particularly interested in the topic. And she has older friends, but they're in different life stages. We had another real badass mountain biker who talked about how people immediately dismiss her when she goes to rent a bike on vacation. They point her to the bike path when she could easily ride double black diamond trails. And she feels lonely at home because there aren't a lot of women around to ride with. And I've heard this from a number of women when they hit 60, especially those sort of later menopausal years, they find that their active buddies disappear. And I'm not entirely sure what to do with all this, but it's on my mind. And I guess the first thing I'd say is that please, please, please know that if you do feel alone, you're not at all. And I'd really recommend joining a forum like the Hit Play Not Pause Facebook group and looking for others in your area to develop that community and those connections, because community is everything. If there was one thing we heard over and over and over this weekend, it's that everybody just really loved being part of a like-minded community. And also, I know it's really hard to not internalize these shitty societal messages, but I encourage everyone hearing my voice right now to resist internalizing them as much as possible and to speak about yourself kindly too. Sometimes I hear women dismiss themselves as quote unquote old ladies, whatever that means, in a way that sounds like they're putting themselves out to pasture when they have so much to offer and so much life ahead of them. So I just wanted to say all that. I appreciate all of you. You are capable of so very much. So let's keep lifting ourselves up as well as each other. All right. Oops, I want to say that again. Sorry, Carrie. I appreciate all of you. You are all capable of so very much. So let's keep lifting ourselves and each other up. All right. Speaking of lifting each other up, this week's guest has such an important story to share. I sat down with Pat Spencer, founder of Getting Your Mind in Gear, which is a mental coaching company specializing in female and LGBTQIA cyclists and endurance athletes. And well, lately, she's really had to use her skills and expertise to help herself. See, Pat went from being a relatively competitive age group triathlete to not being able to do any endurance sports because of a profound case of relative energy deficiency in sports that she suffered while training for her first. One more time. See, Pat went from being a relatively competitive age group triathlete to not being able to do any endurance sports because of a profound case of relative energy deficiency in sports that she suffered while training for her fourth iron distance triathlon in 2016. And that is something she is still suffering the consequences of today, 7 years after she found herself in that hole. And there's a lot to take out of this story. We talk a lot on the show about how important it is to eat enough and to fuel your training and to avoid going into low energy availability. We also talk about how sometimes women feel like they're suffering with a lot of perimenopausal symptoms, and they're really suffering from LEA or low energy availability because the two really mimic each other, and LEA can make perimenopause worse. Pat's story illustrates all of this better than any I have heard, and I really, really appreciate her willingness to share it on the show. Pat is a licensed clinical social worker and a therapist with her own private practice in New Jersey. She is also an avid gravel cyclist, loves resistance training, and has a passion for scuba diving. You can learn more about her and her work at gettingyourmindingear.com. All right, before we get to it, reminder, sign up for my free weekly blog at feistymenopause.com, where I distill all the latest research and what it means for you. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook at feistymenopause.com. Come on and join that community at Hit Play Not Pause, that private Facebook group. And I have an email, hitplaynotpause@livefeisty.com, if you have show suggestions or just some feedback. And finally, very quick thanks to NutriSense for their continued support of the show. Dr. Vonda Wright was talking this weekend about how important it is to keep those jagged sugar spikes to a minimum, and how wearing a CGM, a continuous glucose monitor, has helped her change up her own diet and bring down her fasting glucose levels and smooth everything out. Couldn't agree more. So thanks, NutriSense, for your continued support. Okay, enough of me. Let's have a few words about our awesome sponsors and get on with the show. All right. Well, Pat, I am so glad that you reached out to me to talk about these issues, because I've had plenty of shows about the importance of fueling your workouts and eating enough and, sort of the perils of low energy availability and relative energy deficiency in sport. And I've had plenty of shows about menopause and the symptoms of perimenopause. But I've really not had a woman who can speak from a personal experience about all of this. And you reached out and shared some of your stuff, and I was like, oh, okay, like that sounds important. So thank you for thanks for reaching out.
Yeah, my pleasure. I actually do think it's a very important story to get out. Not necessarily my personal story, but just that these things oftentimes do exist kind of in the hypothetical. We hear about, oh, this is what can happen with low energy. This is what can happen if you don't recover enough. This is what can happen as your hormones start to go haywire. But it's not often that we really hear, this is what actually did happen. And these are the consequences, like the long-term consequences. So, that's kind of why I reached out.
That is a great way to put it. That is a great way to put it, because when you talk to experts, they might throw an anecdote in here or there, but they are telling you textbook. They're telling you, yeah, this is the list of things that may happen, and you don't want that. But it's rare to, I won't say rare, but it's not as frequent that you actually hear from a person who is like, puts their hand up and says, well, let me tell you what happened to me. So yeah, here we go.
So hold on to your hats, everybody. This is a hell of a story.
But before we let's set the stage a little bit as it were. Give us a bit of your athletic background.
Okay, so I kind of look at my athletic background in like 2 or 3 parts. One is
Okay.
childhood, you know, and I grew up a pretty active kid. I grew up swimming on a swim team. You know, so did that from like age 8 to age 18. You know, so I come from that swim background of, you know, getting up early, doing a lot of laps in the pool. I was never the fastest. I found out in adulthood that endurance is more my thing, not sprint. But that was my athletic kind of background. In high school, I was going to run cross country, but instead I found the marching band. So 2 very different worlds, and did that and loved every second of it. And then I kind of fell off the athletic wagon. I went to college. I really embraced the freshman 15. And as a matter of fact, I challenged myself with the freshman 20. I still have the pizza place phone number memorized. And I graduated college like 30 years ago. And then in adulthood, in 2007, when I was in my mid 30s, I think 2007, oh goodness, math is not my strong point. It puts me around 7, 6, 5, like 35.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I had to think. I was born in 72. So
I was gonna say I'm trying to do 35. Math for you, and I'm like, I don't know when you're born. Like, I don't know how old you are. How old are you now?
No, I'm 50 now. Okay. I'll be 51 in June. So gotcha. In 2007, I think I was 35. And a person I worked with said they were going to do a triathlon. And I said, that sounds fun. And at that point, I hadn't swam since I was like, I hadn't really swam since I was in high school. Hadn't run. Like I used to jokingly say my farthest run was from the couch to the refrigerator to get a beer during a commercial break. You know, so it's picked up running. I used to enjoy bike riding, but never competitively. And in 2007, I went and I did my first sprint. Came in really close to dead last, but I finished and I loved it. Yeah. And that just started the triathlon journey. And so from 2007 to 2016, you know, I went from sprint distance to Olympic to half to full. Did my first full distance in 2012, so at age 40. And then did 3. I finished that one. That was Rev 3 Cedar Point. And then 2014, so 2 years later, I finished Ironman Lake Placid. The next year I did Challenge Roth in 2015. Highly recommend that race. I mean, if you ever have a chance to go to Challenge Roth, get out there and do it. And then I registered for Ironman Mont Tremblant in 2016. And that's where my athletic career kind of came to a screeching halt. Because it was in that period of time, so 2015 to 2016, that I overtrained, I underfueled. You know, so 2016 I was 44-ish. And that again, just things went haywire. I didn't finish Mont Tremblant, and didn't really do any endurance sports for a couple of years. Then 2, 3, right before the pandemic, I did USAT Nationals. I qualified. I did a race where I was like the only person in my age group. So yay, I won and qualified. And that was the last triathlon I've ever done, was right before the pandemic. But since then, I've found gravel cycling now, and that's where I'm at.
Sweet. That's quite the journey. I have a couple of questions. So when you say that you were overtrained and underfueled, was any of that, and not the overtraining probably, but the underfueling, was any of that deliberate?
That's a mixed answer of yes and no. Okay. It was not underfueling in let me not fuel my body correctly. It was underfueling in that, at least in the core group I was in, there's a lot of messaging about body weight and power to weight ratio. And if you're lighter, you can climb faster. If you're lighter, you can run faster. It was never, oh my God, you have to lose weight. But it was just this constant message. And then you see other people on the team like, yeah, I dropped 20 pounds last week and look at how fast I am now. So it was like, okay, I'm going to eat carefully with the knowledge I had at the time, trying to make sure I'm getting enough, but also getting enough so I can lose a little bit of weight.
Did it work for a while? Were you rewarded at all?
I did get faster.
Okay.
I got faster. I don't know if I got faster because I lost weight or if I got faster because I was training and was training well, and was swim form was better, run form was better, bike form was better. So yeah, I would see the results. I would see, okay, I just ran this pace a little bit faster. It must be because, I lost 1 pound from yesterday. And at that point I was weighing myself every day and would be like, okay, am I trending down? Am I trending up? Am I trending the same? I'd also weigh myself before and after rides, mainly to see if I was losing weight, to see if I needed to replenish. But yeah, so I kind of had this immediate gratification of, okay, I lost weight and I ran faster.
Yeah. And then at what point, you mentioned DNFing at Mount Tremblant, like, what was that a sudden occurrence of something, or were there any warning signs? And what happened at that race? Like, why, what went haywire?
There were a lot of warning signs.
Okay.
Starting in 2015, so starting the year before. So in 2015, again, I'm a pretty darn good swimmer. Like, water is where I'm comfortable. My other hobby is scuba diving. You put me in water, I'm a happy camper. So in this race, again, it was a sprint race, early season with my friends, at a course I know really well. I hop in the water, and all I can describe it as now is a panic attack happened.
Oh, wow.
But I wasn't panicking in the water. In the water, I was just like, oh, this wetsuit feels tight. So there I am swimming, trying to open up the wetsuit. I could feel my heart racing. And I am a mental health, I'm a therapist, I'm a social worker. I know the signs of panic attacks. I'm like, okay, just breathe deeply. You've got this. You're a good swimmer.
And that does happen.
It does. It does. And at the time, it didn't hit me that it was a panic attack. It was kind of hindsight that I was like, oh yeah, that's what happened. At some point, a lifeguard comes up to me and pulls me over to the boat, and they have netting on the side of the boat to hold on to. And all I could tell them was, but I'm an Iron Man. I know how to swim. Like, literally, they're asking about, like, what's your name? I'm like, I'm Pat. I'm an Iron Man. They're like, that's nice. Thank you. I don't even know what an Iron Man is. We're just the rescue squad. So they pulled me out of the water. They took my blood pressure.
Were you just flailing? I mean, was there...
I actually don't know what they saw.
Okay.
I have to assume it was some type of flailing, because at some point I'm literally trying to take my wetsuit off in the water.
Gotcha.
But never was I panic stricken. Like, never was I, oh my God, I'm going to drown. It was, all right, let me just get this undone. Need a little bit of space in here, and then they bring you to the boat, and I'm like, I'm an Iron Man. Like, that means anything to anybody.
Love that so much. It's so iconic. Yes.
Yeah, but it's also so like a triathlete. It's like, no,
well, that's what I mean.
I can do this. I can ride up that hill. I can run really far. I can swim. So they pulled me out of the water, took my blood pressure. It was really, really high, like 180 over something or other. Brought me to the ambulance, where I'm in the ambulance, and they put warm towels on me, and they're just watching my blood pressure drop and drop and drop. And then I hear on the radio, does anybody know where Pat Spencer is? And the ambulance, the paramedic or the EMT, she's like, what's your name? I said, I'm Pat Spencer. That's me. And so she's like, oh, we got her. So it was my wife and one of my friends, because they didn't see me come out of the water. So go to the ambulance. I calm down. I'm good. My wife and my friend were like, all right, you can go home now. So I get out of the ambulance. I go to transition to get my bike. And another friend he's the race director. He's like, are you good? I was like, yeah. I said, something happened in the water, but I'm good now. I said, I'm going to go home. He's like, no. You get on that bike and you race. I said, all the bikes are on transition. There's like, what's good? He's like, well, get out there and see what you can do.
And what did you do?
I got up there and I saw what I could do. And what I could do is I passed a whole bunch of people on the bike. And again, I'm passing the people or the back of the pack, but I'm still and every person I'm passing, I'm like, oh yeah, getting more and more, well, quite honestly, cocky. and then do the run. And then, I finished, can't say I finished the race because I didn't finish the swim, but
Right.
I finished the bike and the run. And then the next day did another triathlon at Great Adventure. Don't recommend doing one at Great Adventure. The water's really gross. But that was kind of the first sign, was this increase of anxiety.
Okay.
And then at that point, I was training for Challenge Roth, and things were going okay. Like my times they're getting a little bit better, but not quite the improvements that I wanted. I did the race. For me, it went well. I'm not a strong runner, but the bike and the swim and the bike went excellent. The run was a lovely 26-mile walk through Germany. But it was nice. I had a great time and I finished. And then I signed up for a 5K swim. And so I was doing the training for the 5K swim. And again, I just would feel so tired. And I didn't give myself any recovery time. I had a coach, and, so I'm telling her all these things. Then 2016 comes around, I'm training for Mont Tremblant, and things just go from bad to worse. I would go for a swim and feel really tired, go for your 6:30 in the morning swim. I'm swimming 3,000 meters or 3,000 yards, and I would just feel exhausted. Finally, one day I called my doctor because I went for a 7-mile run, and it was an easy run around the area that I know really well. And I just felt tired's not even the right word. It was like somebody took all of the energy and just sucked it out of me. So much so that on the run, I had to stop once or twice, kind of bend over, hold onto my knees, and just gather myself. So I called my doctor, and I happen to really like my doctor and his practice. I went in, I'm like, I ran 7 miles and I was tired. And they're like, well, you're supposed to be tired after 7 miles. But they took me seriously and like, all right, we're going to send you for blood work. We're not really sure what's going on. We know you're in good shape. Maybe back off for a day or two, but you can keep doing that because exercise is good for you. Great. I go back at some point. The blood work came back with some abnormalities, like really high protein in my urine, and a few other glitches here and there, but nothing enough to say these 3 blood tests equal this bad thing. It was kind of like this one thing is a little bit high or this one thing's a little bit low, but the protein in the urine was concerning. So we did a 24-hour urine test, and then sent me to a nephrologist. And he did his test and was like, yeah, I don't see anything really wrong with your kidney functioning. He's like, so we're going to do some blood work. I'm like, great. Everybody's taking this seriously, but also I'm telling everybody I'm training for an Ironman, and every doctor is like, keep it up. Exercise is good. And I don't think they really understood how many hours I was training and the intensity that I was training. And keep in mind, I'm also working full time. And at the time I was working on a hotline for veterans, that can be a pretty stressful job. And I was a clinical supervisor. It's a 24-hour program. And, so I had all that too. So then the nephrologist does blood work, and it came back with really abnormal light chain, kappa and lambda light chain serums or something, which is an indication of possible multiple myeloma. So they then sent me to a hematologist. And they're like, all right, we'll send you for more tests. We don't see any other indicators. And those light chains remained high, but started coming down. And that doctor is like, well, I know you're training for Ironman. Keep it up. Exercise is good for you. You're obviously healthy. You're the right weight. Just look at my arms were like, yeah, sun's out, guns out, baby. It's not like that anymore, but whatever. So they then sent me to a rheumatologist.
Oh my God.
Who did 27 vials of blood in one sitting. They sent me for blood work. And the phlebotomist is like, did they say to do it all now? And I said, they didn't say not to. I said, I don't know. I'm a social worker, not a doctor, not a phlebotomist. And so she prints it out. And if you've ever been to a phlebotomist,
I have.
So she pulls it out. It's like this, it's like a CVS receipt. It's like super long. And I'm like, oh my God. So they take 27 vials of blood.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And again, the rheumatologist is like, all right, so this little thing is off, this little thing is off, but nothing enough to say it's this disease. You know, they sent me for an echocardiogram, they sent me for back x-rays. I had literally $1 million workup, and none of the doctors could tell me what's wrong. So I kept training because everybody's saying exercise is good for you. And training is where I get it's not technically meditation, but it feels like it.
Yeah, we all get it.
Yeah. You know, like staring at that black line in the pool, you have no idea how many really wonderful ideas I've had. I've written letters to people in the water. They don't know it, but I am like the most productive in the water. But on the bike, like I would be doing workouts, and then in Training Peaks, I would write, because I went back and read them recently. I did the 15 miles, but was just sobbing the entire time.
Oh my God.
Which is not me. I'm not that in touch with my emotions to cry. You know, but like literally sobbing on the bike, going for a 3-mile run, but having to walk 2 of those miles. At night, I couldn't sleep, but it wasn't hot flashes or anything. It felt like, well, quite honestly, it felt like I was drunk. Like I would lay down and the room would spin and spin and spin and spin and spin. So much so that I'd have to go sleep on the couch in the living room just so I could put 1 foot on the ground and 1 foot on the wall. Almost like as I was a college student again. Like I had a night party. But I barely drink, so that wasn't it, you know. It was, yeah, I mean, there was no system was working well. You know, my affective system, my emotions were all over the place. My anxiety increased. I wasn't sleeping. I wanted to sleep. I mean, I love to sleep, but I just couldn't sleep. Nothing was working. But nobody, maybe my wife said it, but I didn't listen. Nobody said, stop working out, stop doing, you know, because with Mont Tremblant, a bunch of my teammates were also doing it. And it was like, all right, this is supposed to be a really fun thing. We're going to go up there. My parents are coming. My wife will be there. All my teammates will be there. We'll be there to cheer each other on in the course. So we go. And again, I'm not feeling great. So I changed my expectations from, okay, I want to do well to just, I want to finish. And so I went out, I did the swim. And I did the swim well. And then came the bike, and all hell broke loose on the bike for me. I went maybe 5 miles and I started feeling not so great. And I just kind of made a deal with myself. I said, okay, we have aid stations approximately every 10 miles. I'm going to ride to the next aid station and make a decision. Do I continue or do I stop? And there's a theory of stress hardiness called the 3 C's of stress hardiness. It's commitment, control, and challenge. So what are you committed to? What can you control? And instead of looking at it as a problem, looking at it as a challenge. So when I was on the bike, I'm literally going through these 3 C's. I'm like, initially I was committed to finishing the race, but now I'm committed to not having my wife have to come get me out of the ER. You know, and what I can control is if I stop or if I go. I can't control anything else at this point. I can control what nutrition I put in. I can control what I drink. But I can't control really how I feel. And in the challenge part was just, okay, just get to the next aid station, even if that means turning around and riding downhill or something. So I did approximately 40 miles of the bike. And then there's a part of Mont Tremblant that's an out and back up a hill. And I'm climbing. Oh, it's raining also. And I've seen a number of cyclists getting taken out with on ambulances and stuff because of crashes. So I'm climbing this hill and my gears on my bike just stopped working. It was almost like there was some major sign or something, like, you know, you're not going any further. So I stood there on the side of the road with my bike, having a temper tantrum like a 5-year-old, crying. I'm literally going, I want my mommy. And I decided, I knew that there was going to be an aid station up the road. I'm like, so I'm just going to walk my bike up. but I didn't know how far up the road. So I walked about a mile, no aid station. I'm like, that's it. I'm turning around, calling it, and turned around, rode down the hill, rode to transition, and quit. And got brought to medical because I was freezing, absolutely freezing. And that was how I ended my triathlon career, basically. So
A couple of questions. Like, did your coach or anyone ever query about your fueling? About did food and nutrition ever come into this giant matrix of problem solving?
not that I recall. There might have been things like, well, make sure you're eating, what do you have on the bike, stuff like that, but never anything like, are you seeing a nutritionist? Here, because I don't expect my coach to have all the answers. But, hey, let's link you up with a nutritionist. Let's read this article. Let's do, and I live in central New Jersey. We have quite literally world experts like a mile away, but no, nobody ever really looked at the food. Also in all the blood work, it came back that I had a slight allergy to eggs, dairy, and wheat, which was the cornerstone of my diet, like egg and cheese bagels I love. And so once I stopped eating them, like my face would clear up, my skin would clear up, but nothing.
Right.
And then I'm also left figuring out, what do I eat? If I can't eat wheat, how do I bring a peanut butter and jelly sandwich with me? If I can't eat eggs, well, I still can't bring a peanut butter and jelly sandwich because they probably have eggs in, So it was a hot mess back in 2016.
So how did you get out of it? Like, where did you actually go to figure out what was happening?
Yeah. So I actually was online one day, like I don't know if I was on Facebook or where, but I saw an article on Outside Magazine or Outside Online. And I don't remember the specifics of the article, but I remember them interviewing Dr. Sean Arndt. And he was talking about like endurance athletes and stuff like that. And in the article, it said Sean was affiliated with Rutgers University. And at the time I worked for Rutgers University. So I had access to People Search and Googled Sean, found his email, emailed him. And he linked me up with his wife, Michelle Arndt. And so at the time, Sean was, I don't remember what his title was, but he's a PhD in like exercise or sports science. He's pretty renowned for nutrition and, information like that. He was running oh my gosh, I'm going to forget what they called it. Essentially like the Human Performance Lab, where it looked like a gym, but in it they also had like the bod pod for body composition testing. They had treadmills and bikes set up to do VO2 max testing and threshold testing. And they were also doing some research with Blueprint for athletes to look at biomarkers for endurance athletes, specifically endurance male triathletes. So got linked up with them. Michelle is like an expert in strength and conditioning and also nutrition. So she listened to my story and she's like, oh, holy shit. That's overtraining syndrome to like the letter. So she's like, you can't work out like you were. She's like, you cannot bike, you cannot run, you cannot swim. She's like, we're going to get you doing some strength. So I did strength training with her twice a week. She's also does a lot of nutrition. So then we worked on my nutrition. And it was once we got the fueling better that I started feeling better. So the strength plus the fueling really, really helped an awful lot.
What did you change with your nutrition?
I changed a lot. I learned how to, I should also add that not even because of Ironman, just because of my own biology and genetics, my blood sugar tends to run a little high. I'm not technically diabetic, but I'm pre-diabetic that quite honestly on any day, I think my doctor could put me on like metformin or something. So Michelle's like, all right, we have to find the carbs that work well with you and figure out how to eat those carbs around the time that you're working out. So the high energy carbohydrates, and have the low energy carbohydrates essentially other times. So became much, much, much more mindful about what I'm putting in my body and when, and how to make sure I'm putting enough of it in my body. So although I know there's a lot of controversy about keeping food logs and stuff like that, I did it pretty religiously for a while, mainly to make sure I'm getting enough into my body.
Were you eating considerably more?
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Considerably more regularly also. Like she would talk to me about, hey, if you work this really high stress job, you still have to eat. So what are some things you can bring to your office that are not bags of Lay's potato chips or something? How to bring something that's quick, that doesn't have to be warmed up, that you can eat at a desk or standing in a cubicle or something.
Mm-hmm.
So became much more mindful about that. And quite honestly, it's still a journey with me, figuring out when to eat and how much and what to put in my body. But through Michelle's help and Michelle's guidance, she gets all the credit here, is, I've been able to get back to some level of endurance racing. I actually just talked to her today because I was kind of going over kind of this podcast. I'm like, what am I going to talk about? And she's like, well, she said that when she first met me, she wasn't sure I would actually recover, that I would never be able to do endurance sports again.
Wow.
Because I was so deep in the hole. There's you get into overtraining and low energy. If you get out of it quickly, you're okay. I dug that hole and kept digging. So by the time I got to her, I probably had been overtraining, maybe not consistently, but for maybe a year and a half, 2 years.
Wow. Yeah. Some people, also frame, I've talked to some experts who frame overtraining as almost always underfueling and under recovering. Does perimenopause enter this journey anywhere and weave its way in?
Yeah, yes, it does. So at the time that all this was happening, 2016, I was 44.
Mm-hmm.
And my periods have never been clockwork. They've never been something that I can say, okay, it's every 28 days or every 30 days. It's kind of they're every 4 to 6-ish weeks. When all this was going on, my period was all over. I still had it, but it was all over the place. A lot of these symptoms are quite honestly the same as perimenopause: the increased anxiety, the increased lethargy, the decreased performance. So it's kind of hard to parse out what exactly is overtraining, what exactly is low energy, what exactly is perimenopause. I do think, and this is me just thinking about myself, I think that the low energy and the overtraining impacted my menopause journey, because that's all hormones. It's all the endocrine system that's getting messed up there. It's not just estrogen. It's not just progesterone. It's not just testosterone. It's your insulin. It's all the others, all the other hormones that are out there. And then the signs of perimenopause really started hitting 2 or 3 years ago. My body temperature regulation's never been great. I always run a little bit cold or a little bit hot, but it was like somebody had just messed with the thermostat. I remember texting Michelle one day. I'm at the gym and I was lifting weights because she loves lifting heavy shit. And I texted her. I'm like, I'm not sure if it's hot in the gym or a hot flash. How do I tell?
But nobody at any point had said, because I'm just curious in this whole medical journey, because you are a woman in your mid-40s, right, who's experiencing some of this stuff. Did anyone ever say, let's try some estrogen or hormone therapy? Did that ever come? No. That's interesting.
No. The rheumatologist suggested some medication. She goes, we use this to treat cancer. You might not need it, but maybe we should try it. And I said, no, thank you. Just try some other things first before jumping to cancer drugs when I don't have cancer.
Yeah. Good call.
But,
so then at some point you do feel good enough to compete in that USA in the nationals, right?
I felt
Are you qualified for the
I
nationals?
qualified. So I did the sprint, and I think the phrase "good enough" is a nice phrase because I didn't feel
Okay.
great.
Okay.
I felt like, quite honestly, the DNF at at Mont Tremblant left a really bad taste in my mouth, and I was like, I don't want my last triathlon to be a DNF because of this stuff.
Hmm.
So quite honestly, against everybody's recommendations, I'm like, that's it. I'm training. I'm doing it. Michelle's like, okay, you can train for it, but you and I are going to talk like every day, and we're going to make sure, that the second anything comes up, we're pulling the plug. And in that, I had to change my expectations from doing well to doing good enough. And so I did the one in Jersey at the Skylands, because that was Skylands Tri was also my very first triathlon in 2007. So I'm like, let me go back and try it. Went from almost dead last to first in my age group. But when I did USAT Nationals, it was not the performance I could have done a few years prior. Like when I got to the run, I think I probably walked maybe a quarter of it, which is a 10K run. And, back in the day, I could run 10K in my sleep.
Yeah.
So I'm glad I did it, but it wasn't what I had wanted. I'd wanted to have like LL Cool J says, don't call it a comeback. I wanted that comeback. So that didn't happen.
And that was it. Did you close the book
I
on
closed the book
triathlon?
on triathlon. And I think it was later that year that I bought a gravel bike. Because I was bike riding on my road bike one day here in Jersey, and a guy came up and intentionally ran me off the road a number of times. And I was like, I've had enough of these roads. So I'm going to go. There's plenty of dirt roads around. Let me get a gravel bike. And at the very least, I can ride the Delaware Raritan Canal. So bought a gravel bike, and that's where my gravel biking kind of just started. So now I do all the gravel endurance. Like, I've done Unbound twice. I did the 100 Unbound twice. I did Vermont Overland. I didn't finish it, but I did it in 2021. I did, I've done Rooted Vermont. I've done SBT. Done a few.
Yeah. Yeah. No,
Yeah.
it's fun. But that is still, I am a gravel rider and racer
Mhm.
myself, so I know what these are about. And I have done Unbound the 200, and that was harder than either of the Ironmen that I did, because it takes a lot out of you.
Mhm.
And even 100 miles on gravel is energy dependent, right? It takes quite a bit. So how are you managing that?
I jokingly call bike riding now a rolling buffet. I look like a pack camel when I'm out there because I'm pretty sure I could feed all of the riders around me. I put I very much focus on my nutrition, especially in and around bike riding. I've worked with a nutritionist for like a year or two, mainly to get me to eat more carbs. And I don't have a hesitancy to eat the carbohydrates. It's just a matter of how to make sure I'm getting enough.
I hear you.
You
It
know,
can be a challenge. It can be like, even if you like you said, even if you're not resistant to it, I find myself not eating enough on the bike all the time. It's just because you have to consciously think about it, and it's easy just to not do it.
yeah, yeah. No, it's very easy to not do it. And I'm still working through it. Like what I found this past year is in gravel biking, I love it because we can wear those hydration packs. Triathlon, you'd get laughed off the course, but in gravel, it's like, yeah, wear whatever you
The more
got.
bags, the better.
Exactly. Like people got bags attached to their bike. I'm like, good on you. But I found if I put a drink mix, not just water, if I put an actual drink mix in my hydration pack, I drink more.
Right.
And so now it's looking at what. So I happen Scratch is my favorite brand. So I'm looking for what's the right. How many scoops do I need? And I also happen to love solid food. So I found these bars. They're called Bobo's. Bobo's is
Mm,
the company. Love them. They
mhm.
have this
I love
lemon
them.
poppy seed bar. Oh my God. You know,
Hmm.
um, I love payday bars, the candy bars with the peanuts
Yes, I
and
have
the
done
carrot
entire
top.
events almost on paydays. They're
Oh yeah,
amazing.
yeah, yeah. And at Unbound, I love it because you have your support crew. I have my wife, and so she meets me. She has her Subaru, the tailgate's open. I love it. You watch the videos for Unbound, you see all the pros, and they got like the big vans, and everybody's like washing their bike. I'm like, yeah, no, we got a hatchback, and I've got some potato chips laid out. I got some bugles. I got some Doritos. you know, when I did SBT this year, there was like a torrential downpour and a thunderstorm at one point, and so we stop and there's a rest stop, and I'm going in back and forth in my mind. I'm like, do I stop here and let the storm pass, or do I keep going? But I knew right past that rest stop I was turning onto a highway and would be on the highway for about a mile before turning on side roads. I'm like, there's no way in hell I want to be on a highway in a thunderstorm. So I stop at this rest stop and they had burritos. I just had the best time. I'm like sitting there eating burritos. So I guess to answer your questions, I'm much more mindful about it. And I don't say no to food. If somebody's offering me something to eat and I'm on a bike ride, I'm eating it. I'm where I'm focusing on now is fueling outside of the bike rides. So making sure I'm getting enough carbohydrates before the ride, the meal immediately after the ride, and the second meal after the ride. So like third breakfast, make sure I'm still having enough carbs.
11 C's. Yes.
Yeah. And just kind of paying attention and seeing how I'm feeling with that. So like I said, I'm much, much, much more mindful. I'd be lying if I said I sometimes wasn't concerned about weight. I know that weight is, I know I shouldn't be concerned, but now I'm shooting all over myself, which we don't want to do. But it's about having to think about, okay, yes, the numbers on the scale are saying this, but quite honestly, they're not that important. They're not my self-worth. They're not anything, but how I feel is what's important. How am I getting through the day? How am I getting through not just today, but tomorrow? Sometimes when I'm bike riding, I'll kind of jokingly tell myself, well, this snack is not for today's ride. This is for tomorrow's. Because if I can stay capped off, I don't need to replenish if I'm plenished.
Yeah, no, that's actually really true. And I actually say that to myself as well. How are you feeling?
Overall, I'm feeling pretty good.
Okay.
I am much, much, much more aware of how my body does feel. And sometimes I might overreact. So like yesterday, I'm doing this training camp thing where we have to ride, they give us a plan of how many times to ride and everything. And yesterday I had a 2.5 hour bike ride schedule on the trainer, but the day before I also had a 2.5 hour ride. And yesterday when I woke up, my back was hurting, my leg was hurting. I'm like, yeah, no, I'm not going to ride. Today's going to be a stretch type of day. It's going to do household chores, which is not what I would have done several years ago. I'm like, it says 2.5 hours. By God, I'm doing 2.5 hours. Give me some Advil and keep going. I do find now I can ride for a long, long time. I can ride forever, but I will never be, ever, ever be at the front of the pack again. I used to be like in the 25 to 50% range of finishers. Now I'm in the 75 to end part of the finishers. I just don't have speed. I find my heart rate is a lot higher than it used to be. I don't have the actual numbers, but I can just tell you that, walking up a flight of stairs gets my heart rate going. Doing even an easy bike ride, on a flat canal gets my heart rate up. So yes, I'm feeling good enough to do endurance. No, I'm not feeling good enough to go as fast as I want. And sometimes it's hard. It's humbling. It's like at Steamboat, I'm in the back of the pack. And at the start, everybody is passing me. I'm like, I'm already in the back. Who's passing me? And it's just, quite honestly, sometimes a little sad. Okay, I'm happy I'm doing this. I'm sad that I'm not where I was, but I'm grateful that I'm where I am.
That's very well put. Because you are 50, like where are we with, I'm wondering if there's how much of this is residual from where you were in that hole, and how
Mhm.
much is where you might be in this menopause transition journey? You know, I mean, there's such an intersection of things. It's hard, as you said before, to parse out what's what, but where are you with that piece of this?
Yeah. The menopause journey, I am well into it at this point. Um, so last year was 2022. So I'm having to do math again. So in 2021, like 2020 and 2021, I started really getting like hot flashes, like, and then my period was all over the place. And, the flow was sometimes horrendous, sometimes not. I was like, sometimes like a murder scene. I'm like, don't come in here. And, again, just hot flashes. And the hot flashes got to the point where they were super frequent, like multiple times an hour.
Wow.
Not sleeping, like I'd go to sleep and then those night sweats and the hot flashes would hit, and then I'd be super hot, so kick off the comforter, then super cold because now I'm sweaty, so throw the comforter back on. So I wasn't sleeping, the hot flashes, the period is all over the place. So I went to my gynecologist, and I'll be honest, I hadn't seen a gynecologist in years because my primary would just take care of everything. And I told her what was going on. She's like, do you want some hormones or something? I was like, oh God, yes, put me on something because I need to sleep. Because if I don't sleep, I'm not nice.
Yeah.
So she started me on some birth control pills, and almost immediately the hot flashes went away. I can't say I've had one in over a year,
Oh, that's great.
which I was able to sleep. Because of the birth control pills, I haven't had a period in over a year. But at that point, also with the gynecologist, I hadn't had a period for 6 months. Then I had it, and then hadn't had one for 3 months. And then, so I was well into that journey. So I do think that perimenopause, menopause, whatever this journey is, I do think it's impacting my performance now. I'm definitely rounder in the middle than I once was. I was jokingly saying before that, my arms used to be nice and buff. They did. They used to be. I was at the gym today and I was like, okay, I'm lifting heavy shit. This is great. I'm strong. Got to be honest. I sometimes wish I had that little, the definition right here, the bicep, tricep, but I'm like, okay, is what it is.
Yep.
Again, mourn what's lost, but be grateful for what you have and keep working for better.
That is a mic drop, and I would be very tempted to stop there, but I am curious, when you think that, are you optimistic that there is better, that you're going to get on the, that you're still working your way out of this place and that it is going to get better? Okay.
Oh God, yes. Yeah,
Good.
yeah.
Good.
I tend to be a pretty hopeful person.
Mm-hmm.
I do believe things will be better. I'm just not sure what better actually is. Like, does better mean I'm going to have defined arms and, nice thighs again? Maybe better is me being just more comfortable in my own body. Maybe better is, kind of getting out there and being I hate saying this word, like a role model for others. So I do believe that things are going to get better. I just don't know if things are going to return to what they were.
Yeah. I don't know if that's, when I speak personally, I tend to not look rear view mirror. That's my sort of mantra in life, just like the race is ahead of you, or the event is ahead of you, or life is ahead of you, like whatever it is ahead of you. So I was in my mind wondering if, in your mind, your better was being mid-pack or being closer. I mean, how important that was to you, as opposed to being, you're better being like, I am good where I'm at because I'm here.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I would like to be further up when I'm finishing races. I would like to be a little bit faster. Some of that's based on what races I choose.
Fair. Steamboat might be a hard one. You might want to pick a local.
My sweet spot's actually 50 miles. If you put me in a 50-mile bike race, I actually do pretty well. I'm not quite where I want to be, but I do pretty well. I happen to love the challenge of 100 miles. And so for that, my better is when I finish, I want to finish feeling stronger. So like 2 years ago, the first year I did Unbound, and Unbound was my first gravel race ever. When I did Unbound 2 years ago, about 10 miles from the finish, I just stood up just to, wiggle off the saddle a little bit and get a little blood flow. And I forget if it was the left or right, but one of my quads just seized up. And then I sat back down the bike. I'm like, I still got 10 miles to go. And then I'm pedaling, and then the opposite leg, the hamstring seized up. And I'm like, oh, this is so not fun. So my better is finishing the race without cramping.
Right.
And I did that last year. I was able to finish that race without cramping. When I finished Steamboat this year, I was really far in the back, and they ran out of water at the finish line. So if I ever do Steamboat again, my goal was to have water at the finish line. So,
excellent.
Yeah.
I really, really appreciate not just you sharing your story, but also your psychological insights, and also your expertise for framing things, which clearly shines through that you do a lot of this professionally. So that's a treat as well. Is there anything that we haven't talked about, Pat, that you would like to leave this audience, and I know this audience, with?
I think my takeaway, something I try to teach people, is to pay attention to what you're feeling physically and what you're feeling emotionally. I call it the BMC, body, mind, community. So pay attention to your body. Trust your body. If something's not right in your body, guess what? It's not right. It doesn't mean you have to catastrophize and be like, oh my God, it's this horrible thing. But it's like, no, let's like I did yesterday, let's just take a step back. Let's pay attention. Does your body need a little bit more rest? Does your body need a little bit more hydration? Does your body need a massage? Does your body need to slow down a little bit? So pay attention to what's happening. And if you go tell somebody about it and they tell you, oh, it's nothing, well, go find somebody else. We have a whole community on the Facebook group that will listen. Heck, if anybody wanted to reach out to me, I'm certainly willing to listen, but pay attention to what you're feeling. And then emotionally, again, pay attention to those emotions. Don't 100% buy into them and be like, oh my God, I'm so anxious, this is never going to get better. But pay attention to what the story is, what's important to you. So if someone like myself, I am sad that I'm not able to go as fast. I am sad that I'm not able to go as fast because in part I'm mourning some of what is lost. I'm kind of a little bit of regret of not kind of grabbing life by the horns and being a little bit smarter back then. But what's important to me is performance, and getting out there and living life. So with that feeling of sad, it's like, okay, paying attention, this is important to me, but now how do I move forward with it? How do I essentially accept what I have, but work for more? So.
I'm gonna leave it right there, because I'm getting misty, and I think that's the perfect place to leave it. Thank you so much. I really, really appreciated you sharing this story.
No, thank you so much for taking the time to listen. I really appreciate it, and I just hope people pay attention to their bodies, and train smartly. And if your coach isn't listening to you, or you don't feel like people are hearing you, there are others out there.
Well, that's our show. Come on back next week when I sit down with the amazing Sarah Jane Nichols, who was 7-time British champion, 4-time European champion, and the 1986 world champion in BMX. And now, 34 years later, at the age of 52, she has picked up her BMX bike to compete again. You will not want to miss this conversation. So come on back for that one. And until then, as always, stay feisty. You've been listening to Hit Play, Not Pause, a feisty menopause podcast for active, performance-minded women. I'm your host, Celine Yeager. The show is edited and produced by the strong, talented, and amazing women at Live Feisty Media. Follow us on social media at Feisty Menopause. And please help us spread the word. Screenshot and share this episode on your social media channels with the tag @FeistyMenopause. Share the show with your friends, and please subscribe, like, review, and rate this show wherever you get your podcasts. Word of mouth and good reviews make it easier for other listeners to find. Thanks for listening, and as always, stay feisty.